The right-wing paper, they're focusing on the hunt for Colonel Gaddafi this morning.
They are indeed, and especially on the role being played by British and French special forces in hunting down Gaddafi. Now, both governments have denied that there are any special forces on the ground participating in this, but Le Figaro's correspondent in Libya says he has evidence that British and French officers have spent months living with Berber groups in the western mountains of Libya, helping them plan their advance on Tripoli, training the rebel troops, and now they're in Tripoli helping them hunt down Colonel Gaddafi and sharing intelligence with them. Now, the British Defence Minister Liam Fox has admitted the intelligence sharing, but he denies there are SAS boots on the ground. He denied this explicitly yesterday after it was on the Daily Telegraph's front page, as did Nicolas Sarkozy, who tells Le Figaro that there are absolutely no French special forces in Libya. But the paper points out in its editorial that the difference between special forces and a military advisor might be just a semantic one. In other words, these denials don't necessarily mean that those special forces aren't there.
OK, well, Libération also talking about Libya with something of an exclusive story today.
Yes, this is actually very interesting. They say that the man who's now running Tripoli for the National Transitional Council, who's been put in place to try and control the power vacuum there, which risks descending into chaotic unrest, is a former jihadist, an al-Qaeda member who fought against the US in Afghanistan. Now, his name is Abdel Hakim Belhaj, and according to the paper, he fought against the US in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2003. He was captured by the CIA in 2003 in Malaysia and detained both there and in Tripoli, where he was eventually released by the Gaddafi regime in 2009 after publishing a document in which he renounced his Islamist beliefs and proclaimed his support for the dictator. Now, that change of heart obviously didn't last terribly long, because he then went on to become leader of the Western rebels in the mountains and is now leading the National Transitional Council in Tripoli. Now, if this is true, he'd be far from the only person fighting in the anti-Gaddafi forces who've also fought against the US in Afghanistan. The Gaddafi regime suppressed Islamism in Libya itself, but it did allow hundreds of fighters to leave Libya for Afghanistan. And this, of course, is probably NATO's and especially the US's worst fear if people who fought them in Afghanistan do turn out to become prominent in the insurgency. Belhaj isn't the only person known to have Islamist links who's in the NTC. There are a number of leaders who were members of a Libyan Islamist terrorist group which carried out attacks against the Gaddafi regime in the 1990s and was known to have links with al-Qaeda. So Western powers are probably very worried about the risk of Islamism becoming very influential in the new regime.
Indeed, and changing tack slightly now, French politics also making the front page of that left-wing paper.
Yep, if we have the front page of Libé back, they've got the Socialist Party in time of crisis on the front page. This is because their summer party conference begins today in La Rochelle and goes on until Monday. Of course, this is their last conference before October's socialist primary election, and the Libération is saying a lot of the things that we've already heard about the Socialist Party in recent weeks. They're too divided, the candidates can't agree on any policies, and the voters don't trust them with the economy. Le Parisien is also taking a look at this today. They say they call it an armed peace between the main candidates. They've got a photo of Ségolène Royal, Martine Aubry and François Hollande, the main candidates, all smiling together. But they say behind the smiles, the knives are out. There's also, of course, one big shadow hanging over this election, that of Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Le Parisien says in its piece that it's over. No one's talking about him at the party conference. They're only interested in the actual candidates. But Libération hasn't quite given up hope. They've published some extracts today from a new book written by one of its journalists purporting to give the true story of Strauss-Kahn's campaign, which tells you all about the strategy he would have had and who his campaign team would have been if that presidential race with him in it had ever happened.
OK, not quite letting go there. OK, thanks very much indeed, Elena, for that look at all today's French newspapers. Well, still to come here on Live from Paris, Election Day in the country acknowledged by just 5 other nations. Yes, the people of Abkhazia are heading to the polls to choose a new president. But will whoever wins just be a puppet for the Kremlin? Find out in Focus, coming up after the break here on France 24.